I never thought that a simple trail in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park could lead me to such a terrifying encounter. The air was thick with humidity, a scent of damp earth and decaying leaves as I walked among the towering trees. The dense canopy above filtered the sunlight, casting dancing shadows on the leaf-strewn ground. It was a tranquil morning, but a sense of unease lingered in the atmosphere, as if the forest were alive, watching my every move. The silence around me felt almost oppressive, broken only by the distant call of a bird. But there was something more, an echo of footsteps that seemed to follow me, sending shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. Each crunch of leaves underfoot felt amplified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The trees loomed like sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out as if to ensnare me. It was then that I noticed the ancient Cherokee markings on the trees, symbols carved deep into the bark. They hadn't been there the day before, yet here they were, glowing faintly in the dim light. I felt an irresistible pull toward them, a compulsion that urged me to follow the trail they marked. My instincts screamed to turn back, but curiosity drove me deeper into the woods. As I ventured further along the path, the atmosphere shifted. The air thickened, and an eerie stillness enveloped me. Shadows lengthened, stretching across the ground like reaching fingers. My breath quickened, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me. I pressed on, the markings guiding me like a beacon leading me to Norton Creek, where the sound of rushing water filled the air. When I arrived, the scene was surreal. Thousands of fireflies danced above the water, their flickering lights forming human silhouettes that seemed to pulse with life. I stood frozen, mesmerized by the spectacle. But the beauty quickly turned to dread as I realized the figures were drawing closer, their luminescent forms shifting and swirling like a dark cloud around me. Panic gripped me, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. The fireflies coalesced, forming vague shapes that pressed against the windows of my cabin at night, their glow penetrating the darkness. Each night, they came closer, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. The sensation of being watched intensified, and I felt the boundary between reality and nightmare begin to blur. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I braced myself for the return. The shadows grew longer, and the air turned cold, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could hear the faint hum of their presence, an unsettling melody that seemed to echo from the depths of the forest. Sleep eluded me, my dreams filled with visions of the fireflies and the Cherokee markings, a haunting reminder of the unknown that lurked just beyond my grasp. I tried to rationalize what I was experiencing, but logic slipped away like sand through my fingers. The forest, once a refuge, became a labyrinth of fear. Each creak of the cabin and rustle of leaves heightened my anxiety, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient and powerful was awakening around me. I felt like an intruder in a world that had its own rules, its own spirits, and I was a mere spectator to a story unfolding before me. The fireflies, once enchanting, now felt like harbingers of something sinister. Their shapes morphed into figures I recognized from my nightmares, faces twisted in anguish and sorrow, shadows of those who had come before me. I could almost hear the whispers on the wind, urging me to leave, to escape the grasp of the mountains that held their secrets close. But I was bound by my duty as a park ranger, tasked with protecting this land and its history. I couldn't abandon my post, even as fear gnawed at my resolve. I had to uncover the truth hidden within the markings and the fireflies, to understand the connection that drew me deeper into the forest's embrace. As I prepared for another night, I steeled my nerves. I would confront whatever awaited me, face the darkness that had seeped into my reality. Armed with a flashlight and the knowledge of the Cherokee symbols, I set out into the night, determined to uncover the mystery that had ensnared me. Each step into the darkness was a battle against my own trepidation. The shadows seemed to whisper my name, beckoning me closer to the heart of the forest. I followed the markings, my flashlight flickering against the trees, illuminating the path. Ahead, the air was thick with tension, and I could feel the pulse of the forest quickening, as if it were alive and aware of my presence. As I reached the creek, the fireflies began to swirl around me again, their light intensifying. The silhouettes formed a circle, their ethereal glow illuminating the darkness like a beacon. I stood at the center, my heart racing, feeling their energy enveloping me. It was as if they were summoning me, urging me to join their dance in the night. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the clearing, deep and resonant, as if the mountains themselves were speaking. "You seek the truth, Ranger. Are you prepared to face what lies within?" The question hung in the air, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "I am ready." The fireflies surged forward, and in that moment, I realized I was no longer just an observer. I was part of the story, intertwined in the fabric of the land's history. I had stepped into a world where the past and present converged, where the spirits of the Cherokee lingered, urging me to remember and honor their legacy. The shadows faded, replaced by a brilliant light that illuminated the forest. I felt a profound sense of belonging and acceptance wash over me, and in that moment, I understood the true power of the markings and the fireflies. They were not just remnants of the past. They were a reminder that the spirits of the land were always present, guiding and protecting those who sought to understand. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I knew I had emerged from the darkness transformed. The experience had changed me, deepening my connection to the mountains and the stories they held. I would return to my cabin, but I would never be the same. The fireflies would continue to dance, and the markings would remain, a testament to the enduring spirit of the Cherokee and the land we all called home. As I continued my work as a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains, I became increasingly aware of the people around me, each individual carrying their own stories, fears, and contradictions. The forest was not just a backdrop. It was intertwined with the lives of those who roamed its paths, each step echoing the complexities of human experience. Take Ellen, for instance. She was the park's historian, with a passion for the Cherokee heritage that once thrived in these woods. Her dedication was palpable. She could often be found poring over old maps and texts, her brow furrowed in concentration. But beneath her enthusiasm lay a shadow of doubt. She was kind, or at least she appeared to be, but there was a hardness in her voice when she spoke of modern encroachments on the land. "They don't understand what they're destroying," she would say, her eyes narrowing. In her fervor to protect the past, I sensed a fear of losing her own identity, an identity entwined with the history of the Cherokee people. It made me wonder if her passion was fueled by love or by the pain of loss. Then there was Mark, a fellow ranger who often accompanied me on patrols. He exuded confidence, his laughter filling the air like the wind rustling through the leaves. But as we hiked the trails, I noticed how he sometimes stared into the distance, lost in thought. "It's beautiful here," he would say, yet his gaze hinted at something deeper, a longing for connection that seemed just out of reach. I realized that beneath his jovial exterior lay a man grappling with his own place in the world, torn between the allure of adventure and the weight of responsibility. In the evenings, around the flickering campfire, we would share stories, the kind that revealed our vulnerabilities. I spoke of my experiences with the fireflies and the Cherokee markings, and Ellen listened intently, her expression a mix of intrigue and skepticism. "You're tapping into something deeper," she said. One night, her voice low. "But be careful. Not all spirits are benevolent." Her warning hung in the air, a reminder of the complexities of the unseen world surrounding us. As I reflected on our conversations, I began to see how the forest itself mirrored our struggles. The trees, ancient and resilient, stood firm against the elements, yet their roots were often exposed, vulnerable to erosion. Perhaps that was what life demanded of us: strength in adversity, while acknowledging our fragility. In our quest to protect the land, we were also navigating our own inner battles, seeking to balance pride in our heritage with the realities of modern existence. The Cherokee markings on the trees became a focal point for my thoughts. They represented a connection to the past, a reminder of those who had walked these paths long before us. I often found myself pondering their significance. Were they simply historical remnants, or did they hold a deeper meaning, a call to remember and honor those who had come before? Perhaps the fireflies were a manifestation of that very spirit, echoes of lives lived, illuminating the darkness with their fleeting light. As I considered these themes, I couldn't help but think of the antagonists we faced in our efforts to protect the park. Developers eyed the land with greed, seeking to transform it into luxury resorts and commercial ventures. Their motivations were clear: profit and progress. Yet, in their pursuit of wealth, they overlooked the rich tapestry of culture and history woven into the land. I often felt a sense of anger toward them, but I also recognized a certain contradiction within myself. Was I not part of a system that valued consumption over preservation? Did I, too, contribute to the erosion of the very essence of this place? One evening, a confrontation with a developer brought these feelings to a head. I stood near the edge of a proposed construction site, flanked by Ellen and Mark. The air was thick with tension as the developer, a slick man in a tailored suit, outlined his grand plans. "This land will bring jobs and tourism," he claimed, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "You should be grateful," but gratitude felt misplaced. I could see Ellen's face flush with anger, her hands clenched into fists. "You're erasing history for profit," she shot back, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion beneath. "These trees have stories to tell, stories of resilience and survival." Mark added, "You don't understand what you're disrupting. This isn't just land. It's part of who we are." The developer's dismissive laugh echoed in the air, a stark reminder of the indifference we faced. In that moment, I realized that our fight was not just about the trees or the land. It was about identity, belonging, and the legacy we would leave behind. As the confrontation simmered, I felt a surge of determination. This was no longer just about preserving a park. It was about standing up for the values we held dear. I understood that our roles as guardians extended beyond the physical realm. We were also protectors of stories, culture, and heritage. The forest was alive, and its heartbeat resonated within us, urging us to take a stand. In the days that followed, I found myself drawn deeper into the mysteries of the land. I sought out stories from the elders in the nearby Cherokee community, eager to learn more about their connection to the land. Each tale was a thread woven into the fabric of our shared history, revealing the complexities of love, loss, and resilience. I began to understand that our struggles were part of a larger narrative, one that transcended time and connected us all. As the fireflies danced outside my cabin at night, their light flickering like memories, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The contradictions within each of us, our fears, desires, and motivations, were not barriers but bridges to understanding. They reminded me that every individual carries a unique story, and it is through these stories that we find our strength. The forest would continue to whisper its secrets, and I would listen, attuned to the lessons it had to offer. In confronting the darkness, both within and without, I knew we could illuminate our paths, and honor the legacy of those who had come before. Together, we would forge a future that embraced the beauty of our contradictions and the power of our shared humanity. As the days turned into weeks, the tension surrounding the park grew palpable. The developers' plans to encroach on the wilderness became more aggressive, and our small community of rangers and local residents found ourselves at a crossroads. The stakes were high. We were not just fighting for trees and land, but for our identities and the stories that shaped us. One crisp morning, I received a call from Ellen. "We need to meet." Her voice was urgent. "There's something you need to see." When I arrived at her office, she was pacing, her fingers gripping a stack of documents. "The developer has filed for permits," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "They plan to start clearing the land in 2 weeks." The weight of her words settled heavily on my chest. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. The thought of losing the very essence of our home was unbearable. Ellen looked at me, her eyes fierce. "We have to organize a protest. We need to show them that we won't just roll over as we discussed plans." A moral dilemma began to take shape in my mind. I could join the protest and risk confrontation with the authorities, or I could seek a more diplomatic route, potentially compromising my beliefs. Each choice felt laced with consequences, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I could not let fear dictate my actions, yet the idea of conflict terrified me. "What if it escalates?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ellen placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes standing up means facing the storm head-on. We can't allow them to destroy this place without a fight." That evening, I returned to my cabin, grappling with the weight of my decision. The fireflies flickered outside my window, their glow casting an ethereal light across the room. I thought of the Cherokee markings, the ancient stories etched into the bark of the trees, and I knew I had to act, but the fear of confrontation gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the unknown consequences. In the days leading up to the protest, I felt the tension escalate. Mark, usually so buoyant, seemed more withdrawn. One afternoon, as we were patrolling the trails, I noticed him, staring into the distance, lost in thought. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked, trying to break through his silence. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't know if this protest will change anything. It feels like we're fighting against a machine that won't stop." There was a hint of despair in his voice, and I realized that doubt was creeping into all of us. "Maybe it won't change everything," I replied, attempting to instill some hope. "But it could make a difference. We owe it to ourselves and to the land." The day of the protest arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. A crowd gathered at the park entrance, chants of "Save our forest" echoing through the trees. Ellen took the lead, her passion infectious. As we marched, I felt a sense of unity among us, but that unity was soon tested. Halfway through the protest, a group of counter-protesters appeared, brandishing signs promoting development and progress. Their shouts clashed with ours, creating a cacophony that drowned out our voices. Tensions mounted, and I could feel the anxiety in the air. I had come to fight for our land, but now I was faced with a choice: escalate the conflict or seek a peaceful resolution. As the two sides clashed, the atmosphere became charged with hostility. A confrontation erupted, and Mark moved toward the opposing group, his fists clenched. "Mark, don't," I shouted, but the words fell on deaf ears. In that moment, I was torn between my desire to protect my friend and the fear of further escalation. Just as I reached him, a scuffle broke out and chaos ensued. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I pulled Mark back, my heart racing. "This isn't what we came for," I yelled, trying to make him see reason. "We need to be the voice of peace." But Mark was beyond reason, driven by anger and frustration. "They don't understand what they're taking from us," he shouted back, his voice laced with desperation. I could see the conflict within him, a battle between the desire to protect the land and the urge to fight back against those threatening it. In the midst of the chaos, I caught sight of Ellen, her face pale as she tried to mediate between the two groups. It was clear that our protest was spiraling out of control, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. This was not the way to honor the stories of the Cherokee, nor was it the path I wanted to follow. Suddenly, I remembered the fireflies there, ethereal glow illuminating the darkness. I needed to find a way to bring light back into this situation. "Everyone, listen," I shouted, raising my voice above the clamor. "We're all here because we care about this land. Let's not turn against each other. We need to find common ground." My words pierced through the chaos, and slowly the crowd began to quiet. I could see the conflict in their eyes, the realization dawning that we were fighting against each other instead of the real enemy. Ellen stepped forward, her voice steady. "We all want what's best for this land. Let's channel our energy into something constructive, not destructive." As the two sides began to separate, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. We had avoided a full-blown conflict, but the underlying tensions remained. I could sense that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test our resolve and commitment to the land we loved. In the days that followed, as we regrouped and strategized, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play than just our protest. New information began to surface, whispers of backdoor deals and corruption involving the developer and local officials. It became clear that our fight was not just against a single entity, but against a system that prioritized profit over preservation. I realized that our choices were not simply black and white. They were filled with shades of gray. Each decision carried weight, and I felt the burden of responsibility pressing down on me. We needed to confront not only the immediate threat, but also the deeper issues that had allowed this situation to arise in the first place. As I delved deeper into the investigation, I felt a sense of urgency. The fireflies continued to dance outside my cabin, their flickering lights a reminder of the spirits that lingered in the shadows. I knew that we had to gather evidence, to shed light on the darkness that threatened our home. With each new revelation, our plans evolved. We began to reach out to local reporters and environmental organizations, seeking allies in our battle against the impending destruction. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to uncover the truth and rally others to our cause. The moral dilemmas I faced were far from resolved, but I was beginning to see that standing up for what was right often meant navigating a complex web of choices. I would have to confront not only the developer, but also the systems that allowed such destructive actions to take place. As the fireflies continued to illuminate the night, I knew that our fight was just beginning. We would face obstacles and challenges, but we were united in our purpose. Together, we would shine a light on the darkness and protect the stories of the land for generations to come. As we plunged deeper into our fight to protect the Great Smoky Mountains, the tension around the impending development intensified, and with it came a series of subplots that mirrored our main struggle. Each character's journey revealed layers of complexity, intertwining memories and relationships that added depth to our cause. One evening, as we gathered at our makeshift headquarters, a small cabin near the park, I noticed Ellen staring blankly at the wall, lost in thought. I approached her, sensing a heaviness in the air. "What's on your mind?" I asked. She hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just thinking about my grandmother. She used to tell stories about how the forest was alive, how every tree had a spirit. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I wonder if she knew how fragile it all is. Her reflections resonated with me. I recalled my own childhood, the tales my father told me about the Cherokee and their deep connection to the land. It struck me then that our fight wasn't solely about saving trees. It was about preserving the very essence of our identities. Your grandmother's stories matter, I said, trying to instill some hope. They're part of why we're here. Ellen nodded, but I could see the weight of her memories pulling her down. Sometimes I fear we're fighting a losing battle. What if we can't save it? That moment crystallized the urgency of our mission. We were up against time, and the thought of losing not just the land, but the stories that shaped us ignited a fire within me. We needed to act, and quickly. Meanwhile, Mark was grappling with his own inner turmoil. After the protest, he had become increasingly withdrawn, haunted by the confrontation. One night, I found him sitting alone by the creek, the moonlight reflecting off the water. I joined him, sensing he needed to talk. Ever since that day, I've been thinking, he began, his voice tinged with regret. I let my anger take over, and I didn't think about the consequences. He kicked a stone into the water, watching it skip across the surface. I don't want to be that guy, you know? The one who fights without reason. I understood his struggle. The pressure of our mission weighed heavily on all of us. It's okay to feel angry, Mark. It's what we do with that anger that matters, I replied. We can channel it into something positive. We're all in this together. Our conversation revealed the complexities of our motivations. Mark's journey was intertwined with Ellen's and mine. We were all navigating the same storm, each with our own fears and hopes. That night, as we shared our vulnerabilities, I felt our bond deepen, a silent agreement that we would support one another through the chaos. As the deadline for the developers' plans loomed closer, the pressure mounted. We began organizing a series of community meetings, inviting locals to share their stories and experiences with the land. Each meeting served as a reminder of what was at stake: families who had lived in the shadow of the mountains for generations. The memories of their ancestors woven into the very fabric of the forest. During one of these meetings, an elderly man named Samuel stood up, his voice trembling but determined. I remember my father taking me into these woods, teaching me the names of the plants, the songs of the birds. This place is not just land. It's a part of us. His words struck a chord, reverberating through the crowd. That night, as I lay in bed, Samuel's story echoed in my mind. I recalled the tales my father had told me, lessons about respect and preservation that transcended time. It became clear that our fight was not just about the present. It was about honoring the past and ensuring a future for those who would come after us. But with each passing day, the clock ticked louder. The developer was relentless, and I could feel the urgency growing. We needed to escalate our efforts, but I also felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. The risk of confrontation loomed large, and I wondered how far we were willing to go to protect what we loved. In the midst of this, another subplot began to unfold. Mark, in his quest for redemption, started reaching out to local environmental organizations, seeking allies in our struggle. He found a group dedicated to protecting indigenous rights and environmental preservation, and he invited them to join our cause. One evening, as we gathered to discuss the collaboration, a representative named Leela spoke passionately about the interconnectedness of all living things. This isn't just about trees. It's about our heritage, our future, she said, her voice resonating with conviction. Together, we can amplify our voices and make a real impact. As Leela shared her insights, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Our fight was becoming larger than ourselves. It was a collective movement fueled by shared stories and a common vision. But the clock was still ticking, and I knew we had to act swiftly. In the final days leading up to the developers' planned actions, we organized a major rally, inviting community members, activists, and anyone who cared about the land to join us. As we prepared for the event, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Flyers were posted, and social media campaigns spread our message like wildfire on the day of the rally. The turnout exceeded our expectations. People from all walks of life gathered, each with their own reasons for being there. As I stood at the front, taking in the sea of faces, I felt a surge of hope. We were not alone in this fight. Our stories had intertwined, creating a tapestry of resistance against the looming threat. As the rally began, we shared our stories. Ellen recounted her grandmother's teachings. Mark spoke of his journey toward understanding, and I shared memories of my father. Each voice added weight to our cause, reinforcing the idea that we were fighting for something much larger than ourselves. The rally culminated in a march to the park entrance, where we planned to present our collective petition against the development. As we approached, I caught sight of the developers' team, their expressions a mix of surprise and disdain. This was it, our moment to confront the very forces threatening our home. But just as we reached the entrance, a sudden commotion arose. In the crowd, a few individuals from the opposing side had infiltrated our ranks, attempting to sow discord. The tension in the air thickened as voices rose again, echoing the earlier chaos of the protest. I felt a rush of panic wash over me. "Everyone, stay calm," I shouted, trying to regain control. "We're here for peace, not conflict." As I stepped forward, I realized that this was not just a battle against the developer. It was a fight for our integrity and our stories. In that moment of clarity, I understood that we had to rise above the chaos to demonstrate the strength of our unity. "Let's show them who we are," I called out, my voice steady. "Together, we can protect our home and our history." With that, the crowd rallied behind me, and we stood firm, our voices echoing through the mountains. It was a pivotal moment, one that would define our journey and solidify our commitment to the land we cherished. As the day faded into evening, I felt a wave of hope wash over me. Our stories, our struggles, and our triumphs would not be forgotten. Together, we would shine a light on the darkness and protect the legacy of the Great Smoky Mountains for generations to come. The rally had been a resounding success, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a sense of foreboding crept in. The energy from the day lingered, but it felt fragile, like a thin veil stretched too tight. I could sense that this was not the end of our struggle, but rather the calm before an impending storm. As night fell, the forest around us transformed. The trees loomed larger, their silhouettes stark against the twilight sky. I stood at the edge of the gathering, feeling the weight of the mountains pressing down on me, as if they were alive and watching. The shadows danced ominously, mirroring my internal turmoil. The air was thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the woods, breaking the serene silence. My heart raced as I turned toward the sound, a mixture of fear and curiosity flooding my senses. "What was that?" I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the darkness, stumbling into the light of our campfire. It was Mark, his clothes torn and face smeared with dirt. "They're coming," he gasped, breathless and wide-eyed. "The developers, they're coming to clear the land tonight." The crowd erupted into a flurry of chaos, voices rising in panic. My mind raced, processing the implications of his words. "How do you know?" I asked, stepping closer, desperate for clarity. "I overheard them at the diner," he replied, his voice shaky. "They're planning to start clearing the trees right now. I tried to warn you sooner, but I didn't know how to get to you." In that moment, the weight of the forest felt heavier than ever. The trees, which had once been our sanctuary now, seemed to loom ominously, like silent sentinels witnessing our impending doom. The night air buzzed with urgency, a stark contrast to the peaceful rally just hours earlier. "Everyone, listen." I called out, trying to regain control. "We need to act fast. If they're out there, we can't let them start clearing without a fight." Ellen stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We need to head to the site. We can't let them destroy what we've fought for." As we gathered our things, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The atmosphere shifted, the trees around us whispering secrets in the dark, echoing the conflict brewing within me. I wasn't just fighting for the land anymore. I was fighting for my friends, for our shared history, and for the very essence of who we were as a community. As we rushed toward the development site, the forest seemed to close in around us. The shadows stretched longer, and the crunch of leaves underfoot felt amplified in the eerie silence. I felt a sense of foreboding as we neared the clearing. My heart pounded in my chest, echoing the rhythm of the forest, a living entity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. When we arrived, the scene was surreal. Heavy machinery lit up the area, casting harsh lights that cut through the darkness. Workers milled about, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon them. The sight of our beloved trees, standing tall and defiant against the encroaching threat, sent a surge of determination through me. "Now," I shouted, galvanizing the crowd, "we need to make our presence known." We surged forward, voices raised in unison, chanting for the preservation of our land. "Save our forest. Save our home." The echoes of our cries bounced off the trees, creating a cacophony that reverberated through the night. But just as we began to approach the machinery, a figure stepped forward from the shadows, a familiar face that sent a jolt of disbelief through me. It was the developer, flanked by a group of security personnel. "You think you can stop this?" He sneered, his voice dripping with confidence. "You're too late." I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. "What do you mean?" I demanded, stepping closer, my heart racing. He smiled, a chilling expression that sent shivers down my spine. "You see, I've got everything in place. The permits are signed. The city council is on my side. You're nothing but a nuisance." At this point, as his words sank in, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. The fight felt futile, and the forest around me seemed to echo my hopelessness. But I refused to let despair take hold. I turned to my friends, their faces reflecting a mix of anger and determination. We had come too far to back down now. "Listen up," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. "We may be outnumbered, but we have something they don't: our voices and our stories. We will not be silenced." Just as I spoke those words, the lights from the machinery flickered and went out, plunging the clearing into darkness. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and for a moment, it felt as if time had stopped. My heart raced, and I could feel the tension in the air shift. Then, a soft glow began to emerge from the trees, thousands of fireflies, illuminating the night like stars. Their flickering light danced around us, casting an enchanting glow over the clearing. It was as if the forest had come alive, rallying behind us in our time of need. "Look," someone shouted, pointing to the fireflies. "It's a sign." In that moment, the atmosphere transformed. The crowd, once filled with doubt, erupted into cheers, emboldened by the unexpected spectacle. I felt a surge of hope as the fireflies swirled around us, their lights weaving through the air, creating a tapestry of illumination that felt like a beacon of resistance. The developer's expression shifted from confidence to confusion as he tried to comprehend the scene unfolding around him. The fireflies danced around him, illuminating his face in a way that made him appear almost vulnerable. Stripped of his arrogance, "Get control of this," he barked at his security team, but his voice trembled, revealing the cracks in his facade. As the fireflies continued to twirl around us, I realized how symbolic they were, representing not just the spirits of the forest, but the resilience of our community. We were more than just individuals. We were a collective force, and we would not be extinguished so easily. Emboldened by the fireflies' glow, I turned to my friends. This is our moment. We need to stand our ground and show them we're serious. Ellen stepped forward, her expression fierce. We need to gather. Everyone. Let's create a barrier around the trees. We'll protect them with everything we have. In that instant, the energy shifted. We organized ourselves into a human chain, linking arms to create a protective barrier around the trees. The developer's confidence faltered as he realized the solidarity among us. As we stood together, the fireflies continued to illuminate our faces, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The forest was not just a backdrop. It was a living, breathing entity, and we were its guardians. The developer's team hesitated, their expressions turning from aggression to uncertainty. They had expected a simple protest, but what they encountered was a united front, fueled by love for the land and the stories it held. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the clearing, the sound of a chainsaw starting up. Panic surged through the crowd as the workers attempted to move forward. "We can't let them take this from us," I urged, my voice breaking through the chaos. But just as the chainsaw roared to life, a figure emerged from the shadows, a local elder from the Cherokee community. He stepped forward, standing tall and resolute, his presence commanding attention. "You will not take from this land any longer," he declared, his voice resonating with authority. The crowd fell silent, and I felt a wave of respect wash over us. The elder raised his hand, signaling for calm. "This land is sacred. It is not just property. It is our heritage, our identity. You will not erase our history." His words hung in the air, and I realized that this was the turning point we needed. The fireflies continued their dance around us, echoing the elder's message. This was not just about trees. It was about the very essence of who we were. In that moment, the developer's demeanor shifted. His bravado cracked, and I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. The collective energy of our community was palpable, and I knew we had the power to change the course of this battle. The elder stepped forward, his voice steady. "We will protect this land with everything we have. You cannot silence our stories, and you cannot erase our presence here. We stand united." As the fireflies flickered around us, illuminating the path forward, I felt a sense of hope blossom within me. This was our moment of clarity, our turning point. Together, we would fight for our home, for our history, and for the legacy we would leave behind. As the crowd rallied in defiance, a palpable tension hung in the air, thick with urgency and hope. The fireflies flickered around us, illuminating the faces of my friends Ellen, Mark, and the others, each expression a blend of determination and fear. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my heart pounding in rhythm with the chants that echoed through the clearing. "Stand firm," I shouted, linking arms with Ellen and Mark, the warmth of their presence grounding me amidst the chaos. My breath came in short, jagged gasps, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I could feel my fingers trembling, a stark contrast to the resolve I wanted to project. The developer's team hesitated, their confidence shaken by the unified front we presented. I watched as their expressions shifted from arrogance to uncertainty, doubt creeping into their ranks. The elder's words resonated, echoing in my mind like a mantra. You will not erase our presence here, but even as hope surged within. Me, I couldn't shake the gnawing anxiety that clawed at my stomach. What if we couldn't hold our ground? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I tightened my grip around Ellen's arm, feeling the pulse of her heartbeat mirroring my own. Are you ready? She asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. I nodded, though uncertainty lingered in the back of my mind. The stakes had never felt higher. We were at the precipice of something monumental. Just then, a shout erupted from the developer's side, and the chainsaw roared back to life, its harsh sound cutting through the night. My body tensed instinctively, every muscle coiling in preparation for what was to come. I glanced at Mark, who stood wide-eyed, his fists clenched in determination. Don't let them intimidate us. I shouted, raising my voice above the din. We're here to protect our home and our stories. As the workers moved forward, I felt an overwhelming surge of anger. I stepped forward, breaking away from the chain of arms, my heart racing. You will not take this land, I cried, my voice rising above the machinery. The workers halted, uncertain, and I could see confusion etched on their faces. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremors in my hands. I needed to channel my emotions into action. This land is sacred. It belongs to those who have lived here for generations. The elder stepped up beside me, his presence commanding. Do not take another step, he declared, his voice resonating with authority. The fireflies swirled around us, their light dancing like spirits rallying in support. The developer's team exchanged glances, hesitation creeping in. I could see the internal struggle on their faces. They had come prepared for a simple demolition, not a community united in resistance. In that moment, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a crack in the facade of their bravado. I stepped back, the adrenaline still coursing through me, and turned to the crowd. We can't give up. We have to show them how much this land means to us. Cheers erupted from the crowd, a wave of determination sweeping through us. I locked eyes with Ellen, who nodded in agreement, her expression fierce. Mark stood tall. Beside her, his previous doubts momentarily eclipsed by the collective strength of our community. But then, a sudden movement caught my eye. A security guard, emboldened by the developer's earlier bravado, advanced toward us, shoving the elder aside. Get out of the way, he barked, raising his hand as if to grab me. My heart raced as I instinctively moved to shield the elder. You don't have the right to do this, I shouted, anger boiling within me. The crowd surged forward, a collective force of humanity standing in unity against the encroaching threat. Stop, I yelled, my voice rising above the chaos. We're not backing down. The tension escalated, and I could feel my pulse quicken. The fireflies continued to swirl, illuminating the scene as if urging us to stay strong. I took a step forward, drawing on the energy of the crowd. We will stand together, no matter what. The developers' team hesitated, their confidence faltering in the face of our unwavering resolve. I could see the fear flicker in their eyes, the realization that they were up against something far greater than they had anticipated. But just as our momentum seemed to build, another unexpected turn crept into the scene. From the shadows emerged a figure, Leela, the representative from the environmental organization Mark had connected with. Her presence was like a breath of fresh air, and I felt a renewed surge of hope. Everyone, she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. We have legal support on the way. We're not just here to protect the land. We're here to fight this legally. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and I could feel the collective breath of hope being held. The developers' team visibly shifted, their unease growing as they processed the implications of Leela's words. This isn't just a protest. This is a movement. She continued, her voice rising with passion. We are here to protect our heritage, and we will fight back using every means necessary. The tension in the air shifted once more, and the fireflies danced with renewed vigor, as if echoing her words. I glanced at Mark, and I could see the fire igniting in his eyes again. Ellen squeezed my hand, her grip firm, as if grounding me. In the moment, the developer's face contorted in disbelief, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. He turned to his team, and the uncertainty was palpable. They had expected a simple demolition, but what they faced was a community determined to stand for what they believed in. Back off, the developer shouted, frustration lacing his voice. We have every right to be here. No, the elder replied, stepping forward with resolute strength. You have the right to listen. This land belongs to those who have cared for it, and we will not let you take it from us. As the words hung in the air, a stillness settled over the clearing. The fireflies continued to swirl around us, their light a symbol of hope amidst the darkness. My heart swelled with pride as I looked around at the faces of my friends and neighbors, united in purpose. The developer, realizing the tide had turned against him, took a step back, his bravado crumbling. We'll see about this. He spat, retreating with his team, leaving the machinery behind. Cheers erupted from our side, a wave of relief washing over the crowd. I could feel the weight of the moment lift, replaced by exhilaration. We had stood our ground and shown them our strength. As the crowd began to disperse, I turned to Ellen and Mark, my heart racing with adrenaline. We did it, I said, breathless, disbelief mingling with triumph. Ellen smiled, her eyes shining with determination. This is just the beginning. We have to keep fighting, keep telling our stories. I nodded, the fireflies still swirling around us, a reminder that we were not alone. Together, we would continue to protect our home, our heritage, and the stories that intertwined us all. As the dust settled from the confrontation at the clearing, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion wash over me. We had stood our ground, but the fight was far from over. The developer had retreated, but I knew he would not give up easily. The adrenaline that had fueled our earlier resolve was now being replaced by a deep-seated determination to protect our home. In the days following our stand at the clearing, the community rallied together with renewed vigor. Meetings were held, plans formulated, and alliances strengthened. I found myself stepping into a leadership role I hadn't anticipated, organizing efforts and reaching out to neighboring towns for support. Each day brought new challenges, but I felt an unfamiliar confidence blooming within me. One afternoon, as we gathered to strategize our next moves, I noticed Mark pacing anxiously. He had been quieter than usual since the rally. What if they come back? He asked, his hands trembling slightly. What if we can't stop them next time? I felt a pang of empathy for him. The fear that had gripped him during our earlier confrontation was now an echo in my own mind. But I knew I had to lead by example. We can't let fear dictate our actions, I replied, my voice steady. Every day we fight back is a day we reclaim our home. As I spoke, I realized that I wasn't just rallying Mark. I was also rallying myself. I had come to understand that courage didn't mean being unafraid. It meant choosing to face that fear head-on. The words felt true, resonating deep within me. Over the next few weeks, we organized a series of community events focused on education and awareness workshops on environmental conservation, storytelling sessions where locals shared their connections to the land and art displays celebrating our heritage. Each event reinforced our unity and the purpose of our struggle. During one particularly impactful workshop, an elderly woman named Clara shared her experience of growing up in the mountains. "These trees have seen generations of our family," she said, her voice quaking with emotion. "They are more than just trees. They are our ancestors. We owe it to them to protect this land." Her words hit me hard. I realized that our fight was not solely about the present or even the future. It was about honoring those who had come before us. I felt a renewed sense of responsibility, not just for myself, but for the entire community. This wasn't just my journey. It was a collective one, intertwined with the lives and stories of those around me. However, as we grew stronger, new challenges emerged. The developer, undeterred by our previous stand, began employing more aggressive tactics. Rumors of intimidation tactics spread, local residents receiving threatening letters, anonymous calls warning them to stay away from the park. Fear began to seep into the community, and I could feel the tension rising. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a call from Ellen. "They've targeted my family," she said, her voice trembling. "We found a note on our door." The weight of her words hit me like a punch. I felt a surge of anger and helplessness. "We won't let them intimidate us," I said, though I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. "We'll stand together. Will it be enough?" she asked, the vulnerability in her voice cutting deep. In that moment, I realized that I needed to do more than just rally the community. I had to reinforce our collective strength in tangible ways. I gathered a group of us that night, determined to support Ellen and any others who faced intimidation. We formed a patrol, vowing to keep an eye out for one another, to stand guard against the shadows that threatened our peace. As we patrolled the area, I felt a shift within me. The fear that had once overwhelmed me began to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose. I was no longer just a participant in this fight. I was now a protector. My actions spoke louder than any words could convey. One night, while on patrol, I spotted a figure lurking near the edge of the park. My heart raced, adrenaline surging through me. I motioned for the others to stay back as I approached cautiously. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. As I drew closer, the figure stepped into the light, a young man, visibly shaken. "I didn't mean any harm," he stammered. "I just wanted to see what was happening. I'm on your side." I hesitated, the instinct to distrust battling with the realization that we needed allies. "Why didn't you come to the rally?" I asked, my tone softer now. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But I've seen what they're doing. I want to help." In that moment, I recognized the potential for growth, not just for myself, but for others like him. I extended my hand. "Join us. There's strength in numbers, and together, we can make a difference." His face lit up with hope, and he joined our patrol. As we walked back, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I was no longer just facing my fears. I was helping others confront theirs. Each step forward was a testament to our collective strength, and I could see the transformation happening not just within myself, but within the entire community. The weeks passed, and we continued to rally, educate, and support one another. The developers' intimidation tactics had not ceased, but we had adapted. We organized community watch groups, shared information, and established a hotline for anyone who felt threatened. Each action reinforced our resolve and built a sense of safety within our community. One afternoon, as we gathered for another community meeting, I felt a shift in the air. The energy was different. It was electric with anticipation. Mark stood up, his face a mask of determination. "We need to take our fight to the next level," he declared. "Let's organize a march to the city council. We need them to hear our voices directly." As I looked around the room, I saw the fire in everyone's eyes. This was not just about protecting the land. It had become a movement, a declaration of our unity and commitment to each other and our history. The march was set for the following week, and I felt a surge of excitement mixed with nerves. This was a new challenge, one that pushed me beyond my previous limits. I spent the days leading up to it poring over speeches, practicing my delivery, and rallying the community to come out in full force. On the day of the march, I stood at the front of the crowd, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I watched the sea of faces behind me. We were a tapestry of determination, each person a vital thread in our collective story. As we marched toward the city hall, I felt the weight of our history and our hopes propelling us forward. Together, I shouted, raising my fist in the air, "We are the voice of the land." Together, the crowd echoed back, their voices a powerful chorus. As we approached the steps of City Hall, I knew this was a culmination of all we had fought for. The fear and intimidation that had once held us back had transformed into a force of resilience. I finally understood that growth doesn't happen in isolation. It flourishes in community. Standing there, I felt a profound sense of belonging and purpose. I was no longer just an individual fighting against development. I was part of a movement, a collective voice demanding to be heard. And as we prepared to share our stories, I realized that my journey had come full circle. I had transformed from a hesitant participant into a passionate advocate, ready to continue the fight for our home and our legacy. The march toward the city was filled with emotion and anticipation. The voices of the community united in a powerful chorus, a roar of determination reverberating through the streets. I felt every beat of my heart, every step we took, as if we were marching not just for a piece of land, but for all the stories that had been told there. As we approached the city hall, the pressure mounted. The fear that had begun to dissipate over the past months now mingled with anxiety. What would happen when we arrived? What would the city council say? The nervousness was palpable, but the unity of the community gave me strength. Every face around me was a reminder of why we were fighting. When we finally reached the site, the stairs of the building loomed before us like a mountain to be climbed, but we were not alone. Supporters were already there, and the energy of the crowd was contagious. "Let's do this," I shouted, raising my fist in the air. The collective shout echoed like thunder. The first to speak was Leela, her presence always inspiring. She began presenting data on the ecological importance of the area, her words intertwining with the feelings of each one of us. Listening to her, I realized that it wasn't just the future of the forest at stake. It was the future of our community, our culture, and the connection we had with the land. Then, just as the tension seemed to reach its peak, a city council member approached, interrupting the speech. "We understand your passion," he said, but his voice was cold and calculated. "However, decisions have already been made. Development will happen." My heart sank. I looked at Ellen, who was beside me, and saw the disillusionment on her face. What we had built seemed on the verge of collapsing. But instead of backing down, something ignited within me. "No, we can't accept this," I shouted, my voice cutting through the crowd. It was then that I realized the true enemy was not just the developer or the city council. The real enemy was apathy, the belief that our voices didn't matter. The force fueling the destruction was inaction and indifference. And we were not powerless. "You cannot ignore what we are saying," I continued, my determination growing. "We are the community. We are the history of this place. If we don't fight now, we're leaving future generations with nothing. The crowd began to respond, their voices rising in fervor. We will not give up. They shouted in unison, the force of our clamor echoing through the streets, but the tension escalated. The councilman looked back, as if expecting support from his team. His words were heavy, an attempt to silence our struggle. We need a solution. We cannot continue this resistance without a plan. And then an unexpected twist occurred. Clara, the elderly woman who had shared her story in the workshop, stood up. If our voice isn't enough, then let's do something they can't ignore. Let's unite our stories and turn them into a movement. There was a power in her words. That struck me. Clara began to recount her story of how her family had lived in the area for generations, and as she spoke, others began to join her, sharing their own connections to the land. Each story was like an arrow, piercing the hearts of everyone present. I remember the smell of wet earth after the rain, said an older man. And the songs my mother sang while we worked in the fields. Emotions began to overflow, and the crowd came together in a chorus of stories, a vibrant tapestry of memories and hopes. I was surrounded by voices that resonated with the essence of who we were. The councilman, taken aback, looked around, unable to ignore the power of what was happening. This cannot be ignored, he murmured, his expression shifting from disdain to hesitant understanding. The energy on the stairs changed. The apathy that had once hung over us was being dismantled by the strength of the community. We were not just individuals. We were a collective force, a living story that no one could erase. I tried to focus on the next step. Let's unite. Let's make our voices reach everyone, not just here, but throughout the city. I shouted, feeling the emotion surge within me. We need to make them remember us, to feel the gravity of what's at stake. And so, the atmosphere on the stairs shifted. The faces that had once been marked by doubt now showed renewed determination. The councilman hesitated, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his confidence. If you truly believe in what you're saying, then let's hear these stories, he said, his voice now more open, though still cautious. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss this in more depth. The crowd erupted in applause. Hope rekindled. We were finally being heard. But I knew this didn't mean the battle was over. It was merely the beginning of a new phase. As the meeting was organized, I looked at the faces around me, Ellen, Mark, Clara, and so many others. The strength of our unity was palpable, and I realized that all the hardships we had faced, all the stories we had shared, had shaped us for this moment, the struggle unfolding, the mounting pressure, all converged in one direction: the preservation of our home, our stories, and the legacy we would leave for future generations. The change would not be easy, but now, more than ever, I felt we were ready to face it. The day of the meeting with the city council arrived, and the tension was palpable. The hall was packed, a vibrant mix of people united by a common cause. The voices intertwined in a murmur of expectation, and I felt my heart race with each passing moment. What would happen there could change the fate of our community and the land we loved so much. As I entered the room, the councilor's gaze met mine. He looked nervous, as if he realized he was not just dealing with a group of citizens, but with a collective force that challenged his authority. The weight of our history was about to be revealed. The presentations began, and the energy in the room was electric. Clara was the first to stand up, sharing her story with the same passion she had during the march. With each word, the audience connected more deeply, and I sensed we were forming an unbreakable bond, a cord of voices that could not be severed. These trees are part of us, she said, her voice firm. They have roots that intertwine with our stories, with our pasts. We are not just fighting for a piece of land. We are fighting for our identity. The room vibrated with applause, and I felt the strength of the community growing. Mark stood up next, sharing his experience of fear and struggle, and how the courage of others had given him hope. Each testimony was a brick in the construction of our resistance, but as the meeting unfolded, a new tension settled in. The counselor, who had seemed hesitant before, was now surrounded by members of the developer's team whispering in his ear. The atmosphere changed. I could feel the manipulation and the underlying power trying to control the narrative. We need to be practical, the counselor began, his voice hardening. Development is inevitable. What you are asking for is unrealistic, a murmur of. Disappointment swept through the room, but instead of backing down, I felt a wave of determination rise within me. Inevitable, I shouted, interrupting him. Nothing is inevitable if we fight for it. What is unrealistic is ignoring the life that exists here, the connection we have to this land. The words erupted from me like a flow of lava, fervent and uncontrollable. The counselor hesitated, and I could see the impact of my words. But the most impactful twist was yet to come. In the midst of the chaos, a young woman I didn't recognize stood up and signaled for everyone to listen. "Excuse me, but I need to speak," she said, her voice trembling but filled with emotion. "I used to work for the developer before I quit. They don't just plan to build. They want to destroy all of this. And the city is aware of it." The hall fell into stunned silence. The counselor turned pale, and I felt time stop. The woman continued, her words rushing out. "I saw the documents. They are going to clear-cut the forest and put in a shopping center. It's not just a project. It's devastation." The impact of her revelations was like a lightning bolt across the sky. The initial murmur transformed into cries of outrage. I looked at the counselor, and his expression was that of a man caught in his own web of manipulation and lies. "This is unacceptable." Someone shouted from the audience. "We cannot allow this." The energy in the room changed again, transforming into a cry of resistance. I was consumed by an impulse. If they have no respect for us or this land, then we must act. We need to unite our voices and demand that the council hears the truth. I felt the weight of that statement. It was a transformation not just of me, but of everyone present. The fight was no longer just against a developer. It was against a system that had ignored the voice of the community. The counselor, now surrounded by a sea of indignation, seemed to be losing control of the situation. The panic on his face was evident. "This isn't what I meant," he exclaimed. But the room was no longer willing to hear his excuses. The young woman who had spoken joined me, her courage reflecting the determination that now filled the room. "Let's create a petition," she suggested. "Let's gather all our voices and present it to the council." "Yes," the people around us shouted. "Let's do it." The clamor grew, and the room filled with a new purpose. We began to organize, each grabbing paper and pen, writing fervently. I looked around and saw determined faces, each a vital part of this fight. The transformation I had felt inside me was now spreading to everyone there when the petition was presented. A wave of hope and determination flooded the space. The counselor, now in a vulnerable position, hesitated, but there was no going back. The people had spoken, and their voices could not be ignored. He finally agreed to schedule a hearing to discuss the project, but before leaving the room, I confronted him. "This isn't just a hearing," I said, my voice firm. "This is our lives, and we will not give up." As the meeting concluded, the energy still reverberated off the walls. Hands were raised in support, and I felt part of something greater than myself. I had gone from being hesitant to a passionate defender, ready to fight for what was right. As we left the city hall, the reality of what we had achieved began to set in. The voices of the community, once silenced, now echoed with renewed strength. I finally understood that it was not just about protecting the land, but about ensuring our stories were heard and respected. And as I walked home under the moonlight, reflection took hold of me. I survived, but sometimes I wonder if I really left that place. What had changed in me was deeper than any development or construction. It was the certainty that, together, we were invincible. After the decisive meeting, the community came together in a movement that not only challenged the city council, but also revitalized the connection between residents and the land they loved so much. The petition we quickly gathered became a manifesto of resistance, collecting thousands of signatures and attracting local media attention. The stories we shared spread, echoing through other neighborhoods and cities, inspiring others to fight for their own causes. The councilor, pressured by public opinion and the outcry from the community, finally decided to suspend the deforestation project. Development was put on hold, allowing the forest to remain intact. This victory not only brought immediate relief, but also awakened a new sense of purpose among the residents. The fight for preservation was not just a battle. It was a call to ongoing action. Over time, the group that organized around the fight for the forest evolved into a community association dedicated to environmental preservation and amplifying local voices. Clara, now a respected leader, helped implement environmental education programs in schools, while Mark and Ellen continued to work on projects that combined art and nature, celebrating local culture and traditions. The changes extended beyond the preservation of the forest. Increased awareness led to a broader movement throughout the city, where citizens began to question other development projects that threatened the environment. The city council, feeling the pressure from the community, began to consider sustainability initiatives, promoting practices that respected both nature and the needs of the population. For my part, I transformed into an active advocate for the cause. My role in the fight for the forest taught me about the importance of fighting not just for myself, but for everyone around me. I participated in various conferences, sharing our story of resistance and emphasizing the importance of unity. The fight for preservation became an intrinsic part of my life, and I realized that each small step, each collective action, contributed to a brighter future. As the years passed, the forest became a symbol of resistance and renewal. The space that had once been threatened with destruction now flourished, attracting visitors from everywhere who came to appreciate its beauty and learn about the importance of conservation. The park, now a community space, hosted festivals and celebrations, bringing together people from different backgrounds and stories. Thus, the actions of my friends and me not only changed the fate of a piece of land, but also created a legacy of hope and courage. The fight for the forest became an example that, together, we are capable of facing even the greatest challenges and transforming the reality around us. Years later, walking along the trail that was once threatened, I saw children playing beneath the tree canopies, their laughter echoing through the forest. Clara and Mark were there, organizing a community celebration, while Ellen led a group of young people in an art workshop. The connection between people and the land had never been stronger. But as I watched the scene, a question lingered. What more could we achieve if we continued to unite? The future was in our hands, and the fight for a better world was still underway. If you are moved by this story of resistance, join the conversation. Share your reflections on how unity can transform communities and preserve what we love. Every voice matters, and your participation can inspire others to take action. And don't forget to click to see the next story that appears on the screen. Discover how other characters face similar challenges and fight for their beliefs. After all, every story is an opportunity to learn and grow together.